My teacher saved me from my coach in the equipment room. When I tried to tell my parents, they said, "That's exactly what a predator would do." I didn't even cry. That was 3 years ago. Last week, I helped testify at his hearing to clear his name. I was in 8th grade when Mr. Milton became our new English teacher mid-semester. He was young, maybe late 20s, and actually made Shakespeare interesting. He had this way of making every kid feel heard, but within weeks, something shifted. He stopped the fun group projects, wouldn't help students one-on-one anymore, and ate lunch alone in his classroom with the door wide open. The whispers started immediately. He got too close to girls at his last school. My friend Pauline told me during PE. That's why he transferred. My mom was even more direct when I mentioned staying after for help with my essay. Absolutely not. There's a reason he left his previous position so suddenly. When I tried to sit near his desk during class, Mrs. Curry from next door would conveniently appear in the doorway, watching. I paid attention to Mr. Milton for the next few weeks, and what I saw broke my heart. Parents requested their daughters be transferred out. The principal stationed a security guard outside his door during lunch. Other teachers avoided him completely. I watched him eat alone every single day while everyone else sat together in the faculty room. But here's what confused me. Despite being treated like a pariah, Mr. Milton still brought donuts for struggling students. He stayed late grading every assignment and helped with detailed feedback. When kids dropped his class, he just quietly updated his lesson plans for fewer students and never complained. Everything changed the day of winter formal dress shopping. I'd stayed after cheerleading practice to grab my forgotten backpack when I heard Coach Woods call my name from the equipment room. He was everyone's favorite teacher and led our basketball team to state championships. He said, "Come help me move these mats real quick." But when I got closer, his hands went places they shouldn't have. "This stays between us, sweetheart. Nobody would believe you anyway." I froze completely. I'm not sure if only a minute passed or a whole hour. All I do know is that I was saved by a voice. "Step away from my student. Now." Mr. Milton's voice cut through the room like ice. Coach Woods laughed it off, saying he was just getting help moving equipment. But something in Milton's tone made him back off immediately. Mr. Milton walked me to the parking lot without saying a word, just made sure I got to my mom's car safely. The next morning, I was called to the principal's office with my parents. "Why were you alone with Mr. Milton after school hours?" Principal Rowan asked. My mom went ballistic. "This is exactly what we were worried about. He isolated our daughter." When I tried to explain that he'd actually helped me, my dad cut me off. "Honey, predators make you think they're helping. That's how they operate." They banned me from any contact with Milton and scheduled a meeting with the school board. 2 weeks later, everything exploded. Someone called in an anonymous tip about grooming behavior. I watched from my classroom window as police led Mr. Milton away in handcuffs during lunch period. His car got vandalized that same night, windows smashed, predator spray painted across the hood. Parents celebrated on social media like they'd caught a monster. I couldn't handle it anymore. I rode my bike to his apartment complex 3 days later and found him sitting on his steps, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. His hands shook as he lit another cigarette. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "You'll just make things worse for yourself." But when he saw I wasn't leaving, he broke down. He told me how it called him that he couldn't protect me and the other students from Coach Woods. "I feel like I'm failing you all, and the only way to get anyone to listen about Coach Woods is to involve you and reveal a secret I've been keeping for someone." I told him I was willing to do whatever it took. He told me that I was brave, but he wasn't sure he was willing to do the same. I couldn't keep going without telling the whole truth. Milton took a deep breath and looked at me with eyes that held both fear and determination. He stood up from the steps, stubbing out his cigarette with trembling fingers. I followed him inside his apartment, which was sparse and clean, nothing like what the rumors suggested. Stacks of ungraded papers covered his kitchen table, and resignation letters lay crumpled in the trash. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. 2 men smiled at the camera, arms around each other at what looked like a teacher's conference. One was Milton. The other was a handsome man with kind eyes. "That's David," Milton said quietly. "We've been together for 3 years. He teaches at Westfield High." His voice cracked. "Coach Woods has photos of us from our previous school. He's been blackmailing me for months, threatening to expose us both if I say anything about what he does to students." My stomach dropped. Everything suddenly made sense. Milton's isolation, his careful distance from students, the way he'd still tried to protect me despite the risk. Milton showed me more photos on his phone, threatening messages from Woods, documentation of the blackmail. I've been trying to gather evidence, but he's too careful. And now with these accusations against me, he trailed off, looking defeated. I heard a car engine outside and glanced through the window. Coach Woods' truck was slowly driving past, his volunteer neighborhood watch sign prominently displayed. He was holding up his phone, and I realized with horror that he was taking photos of my bike parked outside Milton's building. I ducked away from the window quickly, but in my panic, I knocked into a small table by the door. The trash can tipped over, spilling its contents across the floor. Among the crumpled papers and empty coffee cups, an orange prescription bottle rolled out. The label showed it was anxiety medication, prescribed just last week, and most of the pills were already gone. More resignation letters scattered across the floor. Each one started but never finished. "Why is that pervert teacher having young girls visit him?" The shrill voice came from outside. Mrs. Portsmouth from next door had emerged, pointing at my bike. Woods had gotten out of his truck and was approaching her with his concerned parent act. "Ma'am, I'm just as worried as you are," Woods said loudly enough for us to hear. "I saw this young lady's bike and felt I should check on the situation. As a coach and neighborhood watch volunteer, I take child safety very seriously." Milton's face went pale. We both knew what this looked like, a young girl alone in a male teacher's apartment after school. The setup was perfect. "Should I call the police?" Mrs. Portsmouth asked, already pulling out her phone. "This is exactly the kind of thing they warned us about at the PTA meeting." I had seconds to decide. If I went outside now, Woods would see me and know I was here. But if I stayed hidden and Mrs. Portsmouth called the police, they'd find me here anyway, making everything look even worse for Milton. Through the window, I saw Woods smile, a cold, calculating expression that made my skin crawl. In the distance, I could already hear sirens approaching. Whether Mrs. Portsmouth had called or Woods had arranged it somehow, I'd never know. "I'm calling them right now," Mrs. Portsmouth declared. "There's a young girl in that apartment with that teacher." The sirens grew louder. Milton slumped against the wall, knowing we were trapped. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up. Officers approached the building while Woods positioned himself as the concerned coach who'd noticed something suspicious during his neighborhood patrol. The police knocked firmly. Milton opened the door, and their eyes immediately found me standing in his living room. One officer's hand moved to his radio, while the other stepped inside. "We received a call about a potential situation involving a minor," the first first officer said. His eyes took in the scene. The scattered papers, the prescription bottle on the floor, me standing there looking guilty. I can explain, Milton started, but the officer held up his hand. Sir, we're going to need to ask you and the young lady some questions separately. More chaos erupted outside. Through the window, I saw my parents' car screech to a halt. They must have been called by the school or the police. My mom jumped out before Dad even fully parked, her face a mask of fury and fear, but the worst was yet to come. Another car pulled up, a blue Honda that Milton clearly recognized. His face crumbled as David stepped out, dressed in a suit and carrying what looked like a folder of documents. He'd obviously come for their planned dinner, walking into a nightmare. David froze when he saw the police cars. His eyes met Milton's through the window for just a moment before he seemed to make a decision. He straightened his tie and approached the officers outside. Excuse me, officers. I'm here to deliver some legal documents to Mr. Milton. I'm a paralegal with Johnson and Associates. The lie came out smooth, professional. He was protecting himself, his career, their relationship by pretending he barely knew Milton. Woods had his phone out, recording everything. I watched Milton's face as David's betrayal hit him. All the fight seemed to drain out of him at once. See? Even his associates know to keep their distance, Woods was telling my parents. I've been concerned about Mr. Milton for months. When I saw your daughter's bike here during my neighborhood watch patrol, I knew I had to act. My mom rushed toward the apartment, but an officer stopped her. Ma'am, we need to handle this properly. Your daughter is safe. Safe? Mom's voice was shrill. She's in a grown man's apartment. This is exactly what we were afraid of. She turned to Woods with tears in her eyes. Thank God you were here. Thank God someone was watching out for her. Woods accepted her tearful hug, playing the hero perfectly. Over her shoulder, his eyes met mine through the window, and he smiled that same cold smile. Inside, the second officer was looking at Milton's phone on the coffee table. David's contact information was visible on the screen, recent texts about dinner plans, heart emojis, years of relationship history just a tap away. But I knew if anyone touched that phone, if they saw those messages, it would confirm Woods' narrative about inappropriate relationships and outside parties. Woods noticed my hesitation as I stared at the phone. He said something to the officer outside, who spoke into his radio. Moments later, the officers inside announced they needed to separate us for questioning. The young lady will come with us, one officer said. Mr. Milton, you'll need to come to the station as well, but in a separate vehicle. As they led me outside, Woods immediately stepped forward. Officers, I know this student well. I'm her cheerleading coach. If it would help, I'd be happy to serve as her advocate during questioning. She must be so traumatized. My mom clutched his arm gratefully. Yes, please. She needs someone she can trust right now. The trap was closing perfectly. In the police car, I tried to organize my thoughts, to figure out how to tell the truth without making things worse. But I already knew how this would go. My story about the equipment room would sound rehearsed, desperate. Meanwhile, Woods would be there every step of the way, the concerned coach just trying to protect his students. At the station, they put me in a small interview room. Woods sat beside my parents, occasionally patting my mom's shoulder as she cried. When I tried to explain about the equipment room, about what really happened, my mom interrupted. Stop making excuses for him, honey. We know this is hard, but you don't have to protect him anymore. Woods leaned forward, his voice full of concern. She's been through so much manipulation. Woods' deadass went full villain mode with that neighborhood watch volunteer routine. Poor Milton watching his boyfriend David show up with that whole "I'm just a random paralegal delivering documents" act must have hurt worse than getting caught with a student in his apartment. In my experience with troubled students, they often defend their abusers. It's a classic trauma response. The detective taking notes nodded sympathetically. Every word I said was being filtered through Woods' interpretation. When I mentioned that Milton had helped me, Woods shook his head sadly. That's how predators work. They create situations where they appear to be the hero. 2 days passed before the next phase of Woods' plan became clear. My phone buzzed with a notification. I'd been added to a group text called Protecting Our Daughters. My parents were listed as founding members, along with a dozen other concerned families. Woods had sent the first message. Thank you all for your support during this difficult time. As we've learned, predators can hide in plain sight. I'm organizing a community watch program to ensure this never happens again. The responses poured in immediately. Parents thanking him, offering to help, sharing their own concerns about Milton. My dad had already volunteered to help lead the group. That evening, I heard Dad on the phone with Woods. Of course, Jim. Whatever you need. I've pulled our phone records. You're right. There's a pattern of calls to Milton's apartment. I can't believe we missed the signs. I wanted to scream. Those calls were me trying to do homework help over the phone when Mom wouldn't let me stay after school, but every innocent interaction was being twisted into evidence of grooming. The situation at school deteriorated rapidly. Dr. Martinez, the school counselor, called me in for mandatory sessions. Woods had shared his concerns about my behavior, and now everything I did was being documented. I've noticed you pay special attention to male teachers, she said during one session. Coach Woods mentioned you might be acting out sexually. It's not uncommon after trauma. My grades started slipping. My focus was shot. All of it became more evidence of Milton's negative influence on me. The worst betrayal came from Pauline. We'd been best friends since 3rd grade, but after Woods had a private conversation with her parents, everything changed. My mom says you're dangerous now, she told me by my locker, not meeting my eyes. She says victims sometimes become predatory themselves. I'm sorry, but I can't hang out with you anymore. The cheerleading team held an emergency vote for a new captain. Woods' niece Catherine won unanimously while I sat in the hallway, officially suspended from the team pending the investigation. None of the girls would look at me as they filed out of the gym. Milton tried to fight back in his own way. He attempted to mail evidence about Woods to the school board, but he was too watched, too isolated. A postal worker recognized him from the news coverage and reported the suspicious package. It was intercepted before it ever reached its destination. Woods' girlfriend, Miss Rodriguez, had started substituting at our school. She made sure to document every moment of my behavior in her classes, building Woods' case that I was unstable and acting out. But the worst violation was yet to come. I'd left my diary in my gym locker, thinking it was safe. But Woods had master keys as athletic director. He'd been photographing pages during practice, finding exactly what he needed. Months before any of this happened, I'd written about thinking Milton was cute. Normal teenage crush stuff. How he made Jane Eyre interesting. How I wished he'd notice me. In Woods' hands, it became evidence of my obsession with older men. When I discovered what he'd done, I confronted him in the hallway after school. My hands shook with rage as I demanded he return my diary. He simply pulled out his phone and started recording. I'm documenting this interaction for my protection, he said calmly. You seem very agitated. Are you feeling feeling violent? I wanted to scream, to hit him, to do something, but I knew that's exactly what he wanted. Instead, I stood there shaking while he documented my aggressive behavior and violent reaction to being exposed. That night, lying in bed, I finally understood the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about protecting Milton anymore, or even getting justice for what Woods did to me. This had become something bigger. Criminal charges, destroyed careers, ruined lives. Woods had orchestrated everything perfectly. He was the hero coach who'd saved me from a predator. My parents saw him as a protector. The community rallied around him. Meanwhile, Milton sat alone in his apartment, abandoned by David, facing charges that would destroy his life whether he was convicted or not. And I was the troubled girl who defended her abuser, who acted out sexually, who showed violent tendencies when confronted with the truth about her obsession with older men. The trap was perfect, and it was only the beginning. Woods' next move came through my older sister. She burst into my room 3 nights later, college brochures spread across her arms, face glowing with excitement. Woods had offered to write her recommendation letters for cheerleading scholarships. He'd already contacted coaches at 3 universities, leveraging his championship reputation. My sister showed me the emails, glowing endorsements of her leadership potential, promises to personally vouch for her character. When I tried to warn her, she rolled her eyes and slammed my door. Woods had positioned himself as the only adult helping her achieve her dreams, while I was the unstable sister trying to ruin everything. The documentation Woods compiled grew more sophisticated each day. He'd created timelines showing my escalating fixation on male authority figures. Security footage from months earlier showed me lingering after other male teachers' classes. Normal questions about homework became evidence of attention-seeking behavior. He'd even found a creative writing assignment where I'd written about a student-teacher romance. Pure fiction for English class, now reframed as fantasy fulfillment. My memories started feeling unreliable. Woods had documented so many interactions differently than I remembered them. The equipment room incident blurred in my mind. Had it happened exactly as I recalled? The more I tried to focus on specific details, the hazier they became. I found myself second-guessing every memory, wondering if trauma had distorted my perception. Woods' version of events came with timestamps, witness statements, documentation. Mine existed only in my increasingly doubted mind. My younger brother started using phrases that chilled me. During dinner at Dad's apartment, he casually mentioned my dissociative episodes and false memory syndrome. 8 years old, and he was parroting psychological terms with disturbing accuracy. When I asked where he'd heard those words, he shrugged and said Coach Woods had been teaching his youth basketball team about mental health awareness. My little brother, who still believed in the tooth fairy, now questioned whether my memories were real. The school's security footage became Woods' most powerful weapon. He'd requested months of hallway recordings for safety documentation. The compilation he created showed me following Mr. Milton to his classroom multiple times, me walking past other male teachers' rooms slowly, me standing outside the faculty lounge, normal teenage behavior, killing time between classes, hoping to catch up with friends, edited into a pattern of predatory behavior. The footage supported his narrative perfectly. A troubled girl with boundary issues who fixated on male authority figures. Dr. Martinez filed her CPS report after our 4th mandatory session. Woods had provided her with concerning documentation about my behavioral changes. The report detailed my sexual acting out, my violent confrontations, my delusional defense of an inappropriate relationship. Child Protective Services would investigate whether abuse at home had triggered my behavior. The irony burned. They were investigating the wrong abuse, looking in the wrong direction, while Woods sat in on the meetings as a concerned mentor. The psychological evaluation felt like an ambush. The evaluator already had a thick file from Woods containing his observations of my mental state. Every question seemed designed to confirm his narrative. When I tried to explain about the equipment room, the evaluator made notes about asexual preoccupation. When I described Woods' manipulation, she wrote down paranoid ideation. By the end, I could see my future in her carefully neutral expression. Therapy, medication, years of being labeled as troubled. Woods' social media revealed the depth of his planning. I spent hours scrolling through old posts on my grandmother's tablet, tracing connections. He'd been cultivating relationships with my family for months before the assault. Comments on my mom's posts about school events, likes on my dad's photos from games, gradually inserting himself into our digital family narrative until he seemed like he'd always been there. The groundwork for trust laid carefully, methodically, waiting for the moment he'd need to cash it in. Family therapy sessions became battlegrounds. Dr. Kim revealed that Woods had been attending her professional development seminars on adolescent trauma. He'd studied victim psychology, learned the terminology, understood how trauma manifested. He'd literally gone to school on how to discredit victims. When I pointed this out, Dr. Kim praised Woods for his dedication to understanding troubled students. Every revelation that should have exposed him only reinforced his image as a caring educator going above and beyond. My attempt to record Woods failed spectacularly. I'd hidden my phone in my backpack during a meeting, hoping to capture something incriminating. Instead, I discovered he'd been recording our interactions for weeks. He played excerpts for the principal, me following him down hallways, me raising my voice, me harassing him about my diary. His recordings painted me as an unstable stalker while he remained calm, professional, concerned. My one recording captured nothing but muffled voices and my own heavy breathing. Catherine's college scholarship became leverage I hadn't anticipated. Woods controlled recommendation letters for the entire cheerleading team. My sister's dreams hung on his continued support. When she defended him at dinner, insisting I was having some kind of breakdown, I saw the calculation in her eyes. She couldn't afford to believe me. Her future depended on Woods' goodwill. He'd made my own sister complicit in my isolation without her even realizing it. Milton's attorney visited me at Dad's apartment, looking exhausted. He advised Milton to consider a plea deal. Lesser charges in exchange for avoiding trial. A trial would expose David, destroy both their careers, drag everything into public view. The attorney explained that fighting meant risking decades in prison versus accepting a deal for probation and registration. Milton was crumbling under the pressure, the attorney said. The daily anxiety, the isolation, the medication barely keeping him functional. He couldn't survive a trial. Woods gained access to Milton's therapy records through victim impact statement preparation. The legal system required documentation of harm caused by the perpetrator. Milton's therapist had to provide records showing his mental state, his history, his vulnerabilities. Woods studied them like a playbook, learning every weak point, every shame, every fear. He crafted his victim statement to hit each one precisely, portraying himself as the vigilant vigilant protector who'd saved children from a predator's escalating behavior. The deal Woods offered felt like a trap within a trap. I noticed the OP uses concrete details like the brother's age and specific phrases to show Woods' manipulation spreading through the family like a disease. I thought that was really smart. The detail about him attending Dr. Kim's seminars on trauma psychology before the assault reveals careful planning that makes my skin crawl. He sat across from me in the principal's office, radiating false concern. If I publicly apologized for my misunderstanding and false accusations, he'd recommend leniency for Milton, treatment instead of prison, the chance for rehabilitation. All I had to do was admit I'd been confused, traumatized, mistaken about his intentions. The principal nodded along, seeing Woods' generous offer to help a troubled student find closure. My refusal was documented as evidence of my vindictive nature, my selfish need to destroy an innocent man rather than admit my mistakes. Memory became my enemy. The more I examined the equipment room incident, the more details shifted. Had Woods actually touched me, or had I conflated two separate interactions? The timeline blurred, my certainty cracked. I found text messages to friends from months earlier describing Milton as hot and wishing he'd notice me. Digital evidence of a crush that predated everything. Woods had been right about one thing. I had fantasized about Milton. That truth made every other truth feel unstable. David's betrayal cut deeper than expected. He provided character references for Woods' attorney, emphasizing Milton's emotional instability and inappropriate boundaries. He detailed Milton's anxiety, his depression, his obsessive behavior. Every intimate detail of their relationship weaponized to distance himself from scandal. David portrayed Milton as someone he'd tried to help professionally, but who'd become too attached, too dependent. The man who'd shared Milton's bed for 3 years now claimed to barely know him. Woods' documentation revealed a horrifying possibility. Some of it was real. Mixed within the manipulated evidence were genuine professional development certificates, real training in adolescent psychology, actual expertise in trauma response. He hadn't fabricated everything. He'd taken real knowledge and twisted it, used legitimate training to become a more effective predator. The truth made his lies more believable. His expertise made his manipulation more sophisticated. Mom's choice shattered our family completely. Woods presented her with months of documentation showing my escalating harassment of him, photos of me following him, recordings of me confronting him, evidence of me stalking him online through fake social media accounts. When she confronted me, I saw the doubt in her eyes. Her daughter, the one defending a predator, acting out sexually, showing violent tendencies, or the coach who'd protected their family. She chose Woods. She chose the easier truth. Dad moved me to grandmother's house the next morning. Mom kept my siblings, insisting they needed stability during this difficult time. Woods became their security consultant, installing cameras, checking locks, ensuring their protection from their unstable daughter. My brother and sister adapted quickly to my absence. Woods filled the gap, driving them to practices, helping with homework, being the stable adult presence in their disrupted lives. I became the family member they didn't talk about. Grandmother's tablet became my window into Woods' world. I created fake profiles carefully, using her email address and photos from gardening websites. I researched Woods' history, traced his connections, looked for patterns, other schools, other transfers, other boundary issues that never quite became scandals, always leaving just before things escalated, always finding new communities that welcomed his championship reputation. I started reaching out to former colleagues, careful to seem like a concerned parent rather than his victim. The meeting with Jessica happened by accident that became design. I'd messaged her through a fake profile, pretending to be a mom considering hiring Woods for private coaching. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop to warn me off. Her hands shook as she described Woods' mentoring at their previous school. The special attention, the private sessions, the gradual boundary erosion. She'd never reported it, too scared of not being believed, too confused by his psychological manipulation. But she'd kept messages, saved emails, documented what she could. Jessica's evidence revealed Woods' pattern perfectly. The same phrases, the same tactics, the same gradual grooming process. He'd told her she reminded him of his deceased sister. He'd positioned himself as the only adult who understood her trauma. He'd made her feel special, then dependent, then guilty for misunderstanding his help. The parallels to my experience were exact, down to specific words he'd used. But Jessica remained terrified to speak publicly, knowing what he'd done to my credibility. Milton's partner emerged as an unexpected enemy. David filed his own complaint with police, claiming I'd been threatening him, showing up at his school, endangering his career. Complete fabrication, but it fit the narrative of an unstable girl lashing out at anyone connected to her delusions. David's complaint added another layer to Woods' documentation. Now I wasn't just fixated on Milton, but obsessively stalking anyone in his life. The police took it seriously, adding it to my growing file. Court-ordered therapy became another weapon against me. Missing sessions while trying to gather evidence counted as non-compliance. The judge saw a pattern of defiance, refusing help, skipping mandated treatment, continuing destructive behavior. Woods attended every hearing, sitting with my parents, the concerned coach watching a troubled child spiral out of control. His presence reinforced the narrative. Why would a guilty man show such dedication to helping his accuser get treatment? Grandmother's fixed income couldn't cover legal fees. We consulted 3 attorneys who all said the same thing. Woods had built an airtight case. Fighting it would cost thousands we didn't have. Woods is playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. The way he's getting Jessica to stay quiet even though she has the exact same story is making me want to scream at my screen. And David throwing Milton under the bus like that after 3 years together. Absolute cinema, bro. Meanwhile, Woods had the school's legal fund, the athletic department's resources, the community's financial support. He'd turned my pursuit of justice into a David versus Goliath story, except I was cast as Goliath, the destructive force trying to tear down a beloved coach. The basketball game confrontation destroyed my last shred of credibility. I'd gone to see my brother play, sitting in the back of the gymnasium. Woods was being honored at halftime for his dedication to student safety. As they praised his vigilance in protecting children, something snapped. I stood up and screamed the truth across the gymnasium. Parents pulled their children closer. Security moved in. My brother started crying on the bench. The scene played perfectly into Woods' narrative. An unstable girl causing public disturbances, traumatizing innocent families. School expelled me the next week. The official reason cited safety concerns and creating a hostile environment for staff and students. The real reason was simpler. I'd become a liability. Parents threatened to pull their children if I remained. Teachers felt unsafe Woods had masterfully turned me into the threat while positioning himself as the solution. The expulsion hearing was a formality. Even my former supporters couldn't argue against the mountain of evidence showing my dangerous behavior. Homeschooling with grandmother became my new reality. She set up a desk in her sewing room, ordered curriculum online, tried to maintain structure, but doubt crept into her eyes too. The priest at her church had pulled her aside, expressing concern about my vindictive spirit. Woods had been volunteering with the church youth group, sharing his expertise on troubled teens. Even grandmother's faith community saw me as the problem. Her suggestions to forgive, to move forward, to let go grew more frequent. The janitor incident pushed me past moral boundaries I'd never imagined crossing. Mr. Curry had always been kind, letting students retrieve forgotten items after hours. I convinced him I'd left crucial homework in Woods' office. While he waited in the hallway, I searched desperately for anything incriminating. Woods caught me on camera, of course. Curry was fired immediately for security violations. His wife, 7 months pregnant, miscarried from the stress. I destroyed an innocent family in my desperate pursuit of evidence. Curry's family threatened to sue. Their attorney sent letters demanding compensation for lost wages, medical bills, pain, and suffering. Grandmother considered taking out a mortgage on her house to settle. The guilt ate at me. Curry had trusted me, helped me, and I'd cost him everything. But stopping meant letting Woods win. The math of justice became brutal. How many innocent people was I willing to hurt to expose one predator? My reflection became unrecognizable. Stress had carved hollows under my eyes, thinned my hair, aged me years and months. People who saw me commented on my deterioration with genuine concern. Woods expressed worry about my mental health at school board meetings, suggesting intervention before I hurt myself or others. His performance of concern was flawless. The worse I looked, the more it confirmed his narrative of a disturbed child spiraling toward self-destruction. Desperation drove me to fabrication. I created fake evidence about timing, trying to make the equipment room incident fit a clearer timeline. The lie was discovered immediately. Woods had security footage proving I'd been in a different location during the time I claimed. My admission destroyed any remaining credibility. I'd been caught lying about details, so everything became a lie. The truth at the core, that Woods had assaulted me, drowned in the flood of my exposed deception. Emma appeared in my peripheral vision at the grocery store. Another cheerleader, younger, with the same look I'd once had. She was shopping with her mom, but something in her posture, the way she flinched when her phone buzzed, felt familiar. I watched Woods' car pull into the parking lot, saw her face change. Later, I learned she'd been getting special coaching sessions, private meetings to work on her form. I'd been so focused on my own case, I'd missed him grooming another girl. The restraining order papers arrived during grandmother's chemotherapy appointment. I'd driven her to treatment, sitting in the waiting room when the process server found me. Woods' legal team had filed for protection, citing months of harassment, stalking, threats. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. The papers included photos of me outside his house, at his gym, following him to restaurants, evidence I hadn't even known he was collecting. Every attempt to gather proof had been turned into evidence against me. Woods' victim impact statement was a masterpiece of manipulation. He cried genuine tears describing the year of harassment he'd endured, the false accusations that had destroyed his reputation, the constant fear of what an unstable student might do next, the toll on his relationship with Miss Rodriguez, the anxiety medication he now needed, the therapy required to process the trauma of being targeted by someone he'd tried to help. Even skeptical observers were moved by his pain. He'd turned my pursuit of justice into his victimization story. Understanding Woods' motivation made everything worse. Through Jessica's information and my research, a pattern emerged. He genuinely believed he was helping damaged girls. In his mind, physical comfort was healing. He saw himself as the only adult who truly understood teenage trauma. The special attention, the boundary crossing, the intimate moments, all justified as therapeutic intervention. He wasn't a calculating predator. He was a delusional savior, which made him far more dangerous. My transformation was complete. I'd become the liar Woods accused me of being, the manipulator he'd warned everyone about, the threat to innocent families he'd predicted. Every tactic I'd learned came from watching him. I'd studied his methods and adopted them, becoming a mirror of my abuser. The recognition sickened me, but stopping felt like surrender. I'd crossed too many lines, hurt too many people, sacrificed too much to quit without achieving something. Planting evidence in Woods' car was my point of no return. I'd found a spare key under his wheel well during weeks of observation. Late one night, I placed printed screenshots of inappropriate messages in his glove compartment, fake evidence to prompt a real investigation. The action violated every principle I'd once held. I'd become a criminal trying to expose a criminal. The evidence was discovered and traced back to me immediately. Woods had cameras I hadn't seen. Another charge added to my file. Woods' nephew became my lowest moment. 8 years old, trusting, eager to talk about his favorite uncle. I struck up conversations at the park, learned about their special games, the wrestling matches that went a little too long, the secrets Uncle Coach said made them closer. The child's innocent descriptions chilled me, but using him for information, manipulating a child the way Woods manipulated his victims, marked my complete moral collapse. When he asked why I tricked people who trusted me, I saw myself clearly. I'd become what I fought against. The countersuit gained momentum as my behavior spiraled. Woods' attorney filed for damages, defamation, emotional distress, lost income from canceled private coaching. The judge took it seriously, setting hearing dates, ordering mediation. My pursuit of justice had become a legal battle I couldn't afford to fight. Every action I'd taken to expose Woods had given him more ammunition for his counterattack. He'd played the long game perfectly while I'd destroyed myself with desperate moves. Everything hinged on Jessica finding courage. She held evidence that could corroborate my story, establish Woods' pattern, provide the external validation the court required. But death threats had started. Anonymous calls promising to destroy her teaching career if she testified. She suspected Woods but couldn't prove it. Fear paralyzed her. She'd built a new life, found stability, couldn't risk losing everything again. I understood her terror because I lived it daily. The system that should protect victims had been weaponized against us. Teachers at school had chosen sides without realizing the full story. The union protected Woods, seeing a dedicated educator under attack from a disturbed student. They organized support rallies, wrote letters to the editor, created legal defense funds. I became the cautionary tale, proof that false accusations could destroy good teachers. The narrative solidified with each passing day. Woods was the victim. I was the perpetrator. The truth had been inverted so completely that fighting it felt impossible. The school board meeting revealed institutional priorities starkly. Liability trumped truth. Settling quietly protected everyone, except victims. Board members spoke in coded language about avoiding litigation, protecting the district's reputation, maintaining community trust. Woods sat in the audience, the concerned educator watching democracy in action. They'd rather enable a predator than risk lawsuits. The system designed to protect students had become a shield for those who hurt them. Using grandmother's church connections felt like betrayal, but desperation drove every choice. I convinced Pastor Martinez to reach out to Miss Rodriguez about youth counseling programs. The conversation was meant to create pressure, make her question her relationship with Woods. Instead, she reported the contact to Woods, who added religious harassment to his growing list of my crimes. Even faith became a weapon in his hands, my attempts at leverage only strengthening his position. Rodriguez finally cracked during a wine night with teacher friends. She'd seen files on Woods' laptop, recordings of counseling sessions with female students. She'd convinced herself they were legitimate, part of his dedication to helping troubled girls. But doubt had crept in. She mentioned it casually, wine loosening her tongue, not realizing one friend would reach out to me through Facebook. The information was third-hand, inadmissible, but it confirmed what I'd suspected. Woods documented everything, including his crimes. Rodriguez's admission about the recordings changed everything. I spent the next 3 days planning my approach carefully. The wine night revelation gave me a target, but accessing those files required precision. I contacted Jessica through our established secure channel, explaining the development. She agreed to help create a distraction during the upcoming faculty meeting while I attempted to gather evidence. The faculty meeting provided perfect cover. Jessica arrived early, positioning herself near Rodriguez in the conference room. As planned, she accidentally spilled coffee on Rodriguez's laptop bag, creating chaos and forcing Rodriguez to leave her belongings unattended while cleaning up. I slipped into Woods' office through the maintenance access I'd mapped weeks earlier. His laptop sat closed on the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it, knowing I had minutes at most. The password screen appeared, but I'd come prepared. Weeks of observation had revealed his pattern. He used variations of championship dates. The third attempt worked. The files were organized meticulously, folders labeled by year, then by student initials. My stomach churned as I recognized names: Emma, Catherine, others I hadn't even suspected. Each folder contained audio files, timestamps matching after-school counseling sessions. I plugged in my USB drive, selecting files strategically. Full documentation would take too long. I needed enough to establish pattern without getting caught. Footsteps in the hallway made my heart race. I closed the laptop carefully, ensuring everything looked undisturbed. The USB drive went into my sock. I'd learned from past mistakes about obvious hiding spots. I slipped out through the same maintenance door, emerging in a different hallway as planned. Jessica met me at our predetermined location, her face pale but determined. She'd managed to keep Rodriguez distracted for 12 minutes. We didn't speak, just nodded and separated. The evidence burned against my ankle as I walked calmly to my car. Back at grandmother's house, I copied the files to multiple drives, uploading encrypted versions to cloud storage Jessica had set up. The recordings were worse than I'd imagined. Woods' voice, gentle and concerned, guiding girls through body awareness exercises to process trauma. His genuine belief in his therapeutic mission made it more disturbing. He truly thought he was healing them. I spent hours transcribing key sections, creating a timeline that showed escalation patterns. Emma's sessions started identically to mine: special attention for a troubled student, private meetings to discuss problems at home, gradual boundary erosion disguised as therapeutic intervention. The pattern repeated with sickening precision. Jessica worked her contacts at the previous school, finally convincing 2 former students to review the evidence. They confirmed the patterns matched their experiences exactly. One agreed to provide a written statement, though she refused to testify publicly. The other offered to speak with prosecutors if absolute anonymity could be guaranteed. The restraining order hearing arrived faster than expected. I sat in the courtroom with only grandmother beside me, facing Woods' full legal team. He'd lost weight, his usual confident demeanor replaced with visible anxiety. The stress was affecting him too, though his supporters filled the gallery. My attorney, a public defender juggling dozens of cases, presented our initial evidence. Woods' lawyer immediately challenged its admissibility, arguing the recordings were obtained illegally. The judge agreed to review them privately before ruling. Woods' hands shook as the judge retired to chambers. During the recess, I watched Woods' support network rally around him: parents who'd trusted him with their children, fellow teachers who'd seen him as a mentor, community members who'd celebrated his championships. They couldn't reconcile the man they knew with the evidence emerging. Cognitive dissonance created a visible tension in the room. The judge returned with a complex ruling. The recordings were inadmissible in the restraining order hearing, but could be forwarded to criminal prosecutors for separate investigation. The restraining order was granted but modified. Mutual restrictions preventing contact between any involved parties. A Pyrrhic victory that felt like defeat. Outside the courthouse, media attention had grown beyond local coverage. Regional news picked up the story of a coach accused by a troubled teen. They didn't have the full context, just the sensational elements. I avoided the cameras, knowing any statement would be twisted. Grandmother guided me to her car, her hand steady on my back. The prosecutor's office called 2 days later. Detective Sarah Chen introduced herself as the lead investigator on Woods' case. She'd reviewed the recordings, recognized the patterns, wanted to meet. Her tone was professional, but carried an undercurrent of belief that I'd rarely heard. Chen's investigation moved methodically. She interviewed Emma first, approaching her carefully with trained victim advocates. Emma's initial denial crumbled when presented with transcripts of her own sessions. Her parents' shock was genuine. They'd trusted Woods completely, even defended him against my lies. More victims emerged as Chen's investigation expanded. Former students from Woods' previous schools reached through careful outreach. The pattern stretched back years. Always girls with trauma histories, always disguised as therapeutic intervention, always with meticulous documentation that he believed proved his good intentions. Woods' arrest happened quietly. No dramatic scene, just officers arriving at his home early morning. He went peacefully, still maintaining he'd only tried to help troubled students. His genuine confusion about the charges reinforced the psychological evaluation's findings. He truly couldn't understand how his healing touch constituted assault. The school board held emergency sessions. Liability concerns dominated discussions, but the evidence was too substantial to ignore. They voted to suspend Woods pending investigation outcome, implement new oversight protocols, and mandate reporting training for all staff. Institutional Emotional change came slowly, reluctantly, but it came. Milton's situation grew more complex. The evidence against Woods didn't automatically exonerate him from the false charges. Legal processes ground slowly forward. His attorney filed motions to dismiss based on new evidence of Woods' manipulation, but prosecutors resisted dropping charges entirely. The system's momentum was hard to stop once started. David finally came forward, guilt overwhelming self-preservation. He provided testimony about Woods' blackmail, corroborating Milton's account of the threats. His career still suffered. Coming out in a conservative district carried consequences, but he chose truth over continued deception. Their relationship couldn't survive the betrayal, but David's testimony helped Milton's case significantly. My family's reaction split predictably. Dad processed the revelation poorly, cycling through denial, anger, and guilt. He'd been Woods' strongest supporter, had helped build the case against his own daughter. The weight of that complicity broke something in him. He started therapy, trying to understand how he'd been manipulated so completely. The way Woods truly believes he's helping these girls while hurting them adds a deeper layer to his character than a simple villain would have. Seeing the dad finally face what he did wrong and start therapy shows how manipulation affects whole families, not just the direct victims. Mom's response was worse. Complete shutdown. She couldn't accept that she'd chosen a predator over her daughter. Instead of acknowledging the truth, she retreated into defensive rationalization. Woods was sick, needed help, but I'd still handled everything wrong. She maintained I should have come to her first, despite her previous rejection of my truth. Catherine struggled most with the revelation. Woods had been her mentor, had helped secure her scholarship. Learning about his crimes tainted those achievements. She questioned whether her success came from talent or from being his relative. The confidence he'd built in her crumbled along with his reputation. My younger brother required careful handling. At 9, he couldn't fully understand why Coach Woods wouldn't be at practice anymore. Child psychologists helped my parents navigate the conversation, focusing on body safety and trusted adults without traumatizing him further. His innocent questions about why I'd been sent away cut deepest. Grandmother's faith proved strongest. She'd doubted me, been swayed by community pressure, but when faced with evidence, she didn't retreat into denial. She asked my forgiveness simply, without excuses or justifications. Her church struggled more. Woods had been so convincing in his role as concerned mentor that many congregants felt personally betrayed. The trial preparations consumed months. Prosecutors built their case methodically, incorporating evidence from multiple jurisdictions. Woods' defense centered on his genuine belief in therapeutic intervention. Psychological experts testified about his delusional framework, how childhood trauma had warped his understanding of appropriate boundaries. I testified on a Tuesday morning. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, filled with familiar faces processing unfamiliar truths. I spoke carefully, focusing on facts rather than emotions. Cross-examination attempted to highlight my obsessive behavior, the lies I'd told, the evidence I'd planted. I admitted to everything, explaining how desperation had driven me to mirror his manipulation tactics. Other victims testified via video link, protecting their current lives while sharing past trauma. The pattern emerged clearly. Woods selecting vulnerable girls, gaining trust through genuine care, gradually sexualizing the relationship while maintaining therapeutic language. His own recordings became the prosecution's strongest evidence. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on multiple counts, though not all. The jury struggled with intent versus impact, ultimately convicting on charges that acknowledged harm while recognizing his delusional state. Sentencing would consider psychological factors, likely resulting in treatment alongside incarceration. Woods' statement at sentencing revealed no breakthrough understanding. He apologized for misunderstandings and crossed boundaries, but maintained his intentions were therapeutic. He spoke about his own trauma history, the sister who died young, his drive to help hurting girls. The delusion remained intact despite everything. The judge's sentence balanced justice with pragmatism. 5 years incarceration, mandatory psychological treatment, lifetime prohibition from working with minors, and registration requirements. Not the maximum possible, but enough to prevent future harm. Woods' supporters had dwindled to family and few loyal friends who still believed in his good intentions. Milton's charges were finally dropped. The prosecutor's office issued a brief statement acknowledging new evidence and interest of justice. No apology, no acknowledgement of the false prosecution. Milton had aged years through the ordeal. His teaching career was over. The accusations would follow him regardless of exoneration. He and David were attempting to rebuild something together, though trust came hard after betrayal. The civil lawsuits began immediately. Parents of victims sued the school district for negligent supervision. Woods' remaining assets went toward his defense. I faced my own legal challenges. The false evidence I'd planted, the harassment charges, the damage to Curry's family. Grandmother's house remained at risk. Jessica became an unexpected ally in the aftermath. She started a support group for Woods' victims, creating space for healing outside the legal system. Her courage in coming forward had opened doors for others. The group met monthly, processing trauma and rebuilding lives. I attended when I could, though my role in exposing Woods complicated my place among his victims. Emma's recovery proved most challenging. She'd been in the early stages of grooming when everything exploded. The interruption was fortunate, but left her with unprocessed trauma and survivor's guilt. Her parents struggled to balance protection with allowing normal teenage development. Trust, once broken, proved difficult to rebuild. School implemented new policies with varying success. Mandatory reporting training helped, but cultural change came slowly. Some teachers remained convinced Woods was a victim of false accusations. Others overcompensated, avoiding any individual interaction with students. Finding balance between protection and education challenged everyone. The financial consequences hit hard. Legal fees drained grandmother's savings. The settlement with Curry's family required a payment plan that would last years. I worked multiple jobs while finishing my GED, contributing what I could. The cost of justice extended far beyond the courtroom. Community reactions varied wildly. Some people thanked me for exposing a predator. Others blamed me for destroying a good man with mental health issues. Most fell somewhere between, acknowledging Woods' crimes while questioning my methods. I'd become a controversial figure in my own story. Rebuilding family relationships proved impossible in some cases. My mother maintained minimal contact, unable to fully accept her role in enabling Woods. My siblings slowly warmed to limited interaction, though the lost years couldn't be recovered. Dad tried hardest, attending therapy and working to understand his failures. Progress came in small, painful increments. The scholarship Catherine received became a source of ongoing tension. She'd earned it through talent and hard work, but Woods' recommendation had opened doors. She decided to defer enrollment, taking a gap year to compete independently and prove her worth without his influence. The delay cost opportunities, but preserved her integrity. Woods served 3 years before release to a treatment facility. His delusion remained largely intact despite intensive therapy. He accepted he'd caused harm but couldn't fully grasp why his methods were wrong. The treatment team focused on behavioral modification rather than achieving genuine understanding. Some minds couldn't be changed, only contained. I started community college while working, studying social work with focus on trauma-informed care. The irony wasn't lost on me. Woods had claimed to help traumatized girls while traumatizing them further. I wanted to learn legitimate therapeutic techniques, understanding both how to help and how helping could become harmful. Rodriguez never fully recovered from the revelation. She genuinely loved Woods, believed in his mission, defended him against accusations. Learning the truth shattered her worldview. She left teaching, unable to trust her judgment about students or colleagues. Last I heard, she was working in corporate training, far from any vulnerable populations. The ripple effects continued for years. Other schools in the district investigated past complaints differently, uncovering additional predators who'd been protected by institutional inertia. Woods wasn't unique. He was part of a system that prioritized reputation over safety. Each new revelation brought fresh trauma for communities grappling with institutional betrayal. My advocacy work began small, speaking at teacher training sessions about recognizing grooming behaviors. I focused on Woods' techniques specifically, how he'd hidden abuse behind therapeutic language. Some audiences received it well, others remained skeptical, seeing me as the troubled teen who'd destroyed a man's life. Curry found new employment eventually, though the stress had taken its toll. His family never fully forgave me, despite understanding the desperation that drove my actions. I sent payments monthly, a reminder of how seeking justice had harmed innocence. His daughter was born healthy, which felt like the only grace in that situation. 5 years after everything began, I returned to the equipment room. The school had converted it to general storage, removing any athletic equipment. Standing there, I felt neither triumph nor closure. The space held no power anymore, just empty shelves and cleaning supplies. The memories remained, but their hold had loosened. Woods completed his treatment program and relocated to another state where his registration requirements were less restrictive. He worked in adult education, carefully monitored but still teaching. The system couldn't completely prevent him from accessing vulnerable populations, only limit and supervise that access. Perfect justice remained elusive. I maintained contact with some victims through Jessica's support group. We shared a unique bond, not just trauma, but the specific experience of being disbelieved, of fighting systems designed to protect predators. Some healed faster than others, some never fully recovered. All carried scars that shaped their futures in ways Woods never comprehended. My relationship with grandmother deepened through shared struggle. She'd stood by me when everyone else fell away, even through her own doubts. Her faith had been tested but emerged stronger. She passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years ago, having seen some measure of justice achieved. I inherited her house, saved from foreclosure by community fundraising Jessica organized. The final civil settlements took 7 years to fully resolve. Insurance companies fought every claim, arguing about institutional liability versus individual actions. Victims received modest compensation that couldn't restore lost innocence or opportunities. Money felt hollow compared to acknowledgement, but it helped with therapy costs and education. Today, I work as a victim advocate specializing in institutional abuse cases. My history helps build trust with clients facing similar disbelief. I teach them to document carefully, seek support, avoid the desperate measures that nearly destroyed me. Sometimes the system works, often it doesn't. We persist anyway. Milton found peace teaching English online to international students. The distance felt safer, allowing him to share his love of literature without risking false accusations. He and David built a quiet life in a city where their history was unknown. They sent a card when they married, a simple acknowledgement of survival and resilience. My siblings and I maintain cordial but distant relationships. Too much damage occurred during crucial developmental years. We share holidays occasionally, avoiding deep conversations about the past. They've built their own lives, processed their own trauma, found their own ways forward. The family Woods destroyed never fully rebuilt, just evolved into something different. The equipment room incident feels like ancient history now, though barely a decade has passed. I still flinch at certain sounds, still verify exits in new spaces, still document interactions that feel boundary crossing. These habits serve me well in advocacy work. Hypervigilance, once a trauma response, became a professional asset. Woods' legacy is complex. He caused immeasurable harm while genuinely believing he helped. His case changed district policies, improved training protocols, and saved future victims through increased awareness. Evil rarely appears as pure malevolence. More often, it wears the mask of good intentions corrupted by delusion and power. I think about the girls he didn't reach because I exposed him. Emma healed. Catherine found her own success. Others never experienced his therapeutic touch because systems finally functioned. That's the only victory that matters. Not punishment or vindication, but prevention. Breaking cycles before they claim new victims. My story spreads in victim advocacy circles as both cautionary tale and inspiration. I share it selectively, emphasizing the cost of justice and the importance of systematic change over individual vengeance. Young advocates sometimes see me as a hero. I correct that quickly. Heroes don't destroy innocent families or plant evidence. Survivors do what they must and live with consequences. The nightmares faded gradually. Therapy helped, though finding therapists who understood institutional betrayal took time. EMDR processed the trauma while cognitive work addressed the guilt. I'll never fully forgive myself for Curry's family's pain, but I've learned to carry it without drowning. On quiet evenings, I sometimes drive past the school. New buildings have replaced old ones, different names mark the dedications. The championship banners Woods earned still hang in the gymnasium. His crimes didn't erase the victories, just complicated their meaning. History resists simple narratives. I've never spoken to Woods since the trial. He sent one letter from treatment, maintaining his therapeutic intentions while acknowledging harm caused. I didn't respond. Some conversations serve no purpose. He exists now as a cautionary tale in training materials, a case study in how helping professionals can become harmful. That's legacy enough. The community healed unevenly. Some families moved away, unable to reconcile their memories with revealed truth. Others stayed and worked to build better systems. Trust, once broken institutionally, required required years to rebuild. New teachers faced additional scrutiny. New policies created bureaucratic barriers alongside protections. Progress came through friction and discomfort. I still see his supporters occasionally. They avoid eye contact, carrying their own burden of enabling harm. I don't judge them harshly anymore. Woods fooled experts, manipulated systems designed to catch predators. His victims weren't just the girls he touched, but entire communities he deceived. Healing requires acknowledging all wounds. My mother died without ever fully accepting the truth. Cancer took her quickly, perhaps merciful in sparing prolonged reconciliation attempts. At her funeral, I sat with siblings who barely knew me, mourning a relationship that died years before her body. Woods had stolen that too, the chance for redemption and repair. This work sustains me now. Each case I support, each victim believed, each predator exposed balances slightly against the damage caused in pursuing my own justice. Perfect redemption isn't possible, but purposeful living helps. I've built something meaningful from trauma's wreckage. The equipment room was demolished last summer during renovations. I watched from across the street as excavators reduced it to rubble. No ceremony marked its passing, just construction efficiency. A new science lab stands there now, bright and open with windows everywhere. Progress takes many forms. Woods will die believing he helped troubled girls. No amount of therapy or consequence penetrated his delusion completely. That's perhaps the hardest truth. Some people can't be fixed, only managed. The girls he hurt will carry those scars forever while he rests peacefully in his own distorted reality. Justice has limits, but we persist. Jessica's support group has chapters in 3 states now. Training programs I developed help teachers recognize grooming. Emma mentors younger victims. Catherine speaks at conferences about reclaiming success. Milton tutors struggling students online. We've built something from ashes, not restoration, but transformation. 10 years later, I no longer check locks obsessively or document every interaction. The hypervigilance softened into professional awareness. I can sit with my back to doors, trust therapeutic professionals, believe in institutional good faith while remaining watchful. Healing happened gradually, incompletely, but genuinely. The story ends not with triumph, but with continuation. Tomorrow, I'll review another case, support another victim, challenge another system. Woods was one predator among many, special only in his self-delusion. The work continues because the problem persists. That's neither depressing nor inspiring, just true. I keep grandmother's picture on my desk, reminding me that unconditional love exists even in dark places. Her faith sustained me when my own faltered. Her house shelters me still. Some gifts transcend their givers, becoming foundations for futures they couldn't imagine. That's enough. The equipment room is gone. Woods is contained. The victims survived. The systems improved marginally. I found purpose in prevention. Not a happy ending, but a real one. Messy, incomplete, ongoing. Justice rarely provides closure. It just creates space for whatever comes next, and something always comes next. Oh wow, what an ending. Hearing about Jessica's support group growing to 3 states and Emma helping other victims now, that's just amazing. It doesn't just have some fairy tale ending, but actual messy, complicated healing where good things grow from bad experiences. Subscribe to see more of my content. I appreciate you all for watching.